Starting. I'm gonna show my face. Tell me when you're starting.
I think we just started. How about them Cowboys? There we go.
Hello, YouTube, and everyone in general. How are we doing tonight, gentlemen?
We're doing awesome. How you doing, Mike?
Pretty
Doing
good.
pretty good. I can't wait to break this game down, man.
Man, I've never been more excited about a national championship game as far as I can remember. Welcome to the show,
Should be a fun
Young, where we talk college sports. And today we're going to break down, obviously, we're going to break down the 2023 TCU National Championship game live from Los Angeles. In one corner, we have the challenger, weighing in at 13 and 1. They are the crazy looking lizards called the Horned Frogs, straight from Texas Christian University out of somewhere in Texas. Sorry, TCU.
Fort Worth.
Fort Worth, Texas. And in the other corner, weighing in at 14-0, your reigning, defending, undisputed college football playoff national champs, the Georgia Bulldogs.
Out of Athens.
Oh yeah, out of Athens.
Not Greece.
And something to remember, folks, if Georgia wins it all, they'll be the first repeat champion since the Alabama Crimson Tide from 2011 and 2012. Oh, guess who is also on that coaching staff? Kirby Smart. Coincidence? I think not.
But don't forget, the underdog, the TCU, are undefeated in the city of Los Angeles.
And if they win it all, it'll be the first time since 1938.
And the second, 1936.
None of us were here for that.
Who did they
Not
beat
even our grandparents.
in Los Angeles? Oh, it was the Wisconsin Badgers, who are currently repped on Jackson's chest because he's wearing a Wisconsin hoodie.
Yep, some friends of mine got me that years back.
In the
time for the arrival of Fickle, man.
Oh, I got on a little bit of a Gonzaga on tonight.
Oh yeah, buddy.
Maybe they'll come back and beat San Fran.
Yeah,
You know
maybe.
So
all right, gentlemen, let's
So-
into this puppy and let's talk some national championship.
I will say this is the first game in SoFi Stadium for college, if I'm correct, right? Because none of the California teams got to break it in, did they?
Nope.
Mm-mm. Well, there is that
So
LA
Georgia-
Bowl. The
Oh, it
Jimmy
is
Kimmel
right.
LA Bowl, so that counts.
LA Bowl.
Never mind. Sorry, Georgia TCU fans, you don't get to break new ground.
Well, actually, they do because it's the first national championship. So you look at it that way, you still make history as the first team to do it.
Oh yeah.
Now, I will say, TCU might be maybe 14th at this point. But TCU runs the exact same defense as Ohio State, and Georgia struggled with the same exact defense. The only problem is TCU, in my opinion, runs it a little better.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
TCU, their defense has, yards per game anyway they've given up. It's not as good as Ohio State's or Georgia's or Michigan's that were in the playoff, but they have had success just getting stops, at the right times all year. And that's helped them win games. They've just found ways to get stops, even though I don't think their defense is necessarily, one of the best ones in college football. They have struggled this year. They've just gotten stops when they needed to most of the time, but they're just going to have to do it against Georgia, and that's going to be tough.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is, you attack Michigan, you jump the route, cause the 2 interceptions return for touchdown, aka for those of you children like out there watching us, that is also referenced as a pick six. So if you know what a pick six is, you know what an interception for a touchdown is. It's just this different lingo with the same thing. The NCAA has taken and decided we're going to go with the KIT system. But anyway, TCU needs to replicate the same performance on defense and even better. So instead of 3 interceptions, 2 pick sixes, we need like 5 interceptions, 4 pick sixes. We need 4, 3 pick sixes.
That TCU defense, oh my God, it is 80th in total defense, 92nd in passing yards allowed per game, 70th in rushing yards allowed per game, 64th in points allowed per game, 60th in the red zone, and they are tied 71st in sacks per game. Not good, TCU. You don't need to be Alabama, but do enough on defense, and you're good to go.
Well, that's the whole point. Like I said earlier, they don't have a great defense, but they've literally just found ways to get stops all year. I mean, they're essentially USC, but a little bit better on defense than USC. But they're essentially USC, but they've gotten stops when they needed to, whereas USC could not in the big moments that mattered. TCU's just found ways.
Right.
You look at all their one-score games they play. They literally won like 6 or 7 one-score games. They could have lost every single one of those games, but they got the stop they needed and they got the score that they needed. That's why TCU's had the Cinderella run. They've had a fantastic season. They've shown they belong, but any one of those results have gone a different way, they wouldn't even have been here. So, again, if they're going to win this game, their defense and their offense is just going to have to find a way, keep the game close, and at the end of the game, get the stop and the score they need to win.
Yeah. Well, because you look at a lot of TCU season, the Baylor game, Baylor should have won that game in a lot of people's books. So we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But Baylor, TCU was able to run their field goal unit out and was able to kick the game winners. And a lot of people were like, TCU's playing with fire because they keep getting in all these close games. And eventually their luck's going to run out one of these times. And what it'd be Kansas State, who stops them at the goal line, which if you saw our stream when we did the recap for those games, for the title games, we said Max Duggan should have ran it in or do a play action or something along that line. And Jeffrey's like, why don't you just QB sneak it? One of those things. But that's neither here nor there. But TCU's defense, they can't be like USC and just say, okay, we're going to win a shootout every time, because Georgia, they're a team you don't want to get into a shootout with because they will burn you just about every time.
There you go. I was going to say, Ohio State, if you want to think about it technically, Ohio State got into a shootout with them, and if things had been called properly, Ohio State would have kicked their butts in a shootout. To Jeffrey's point, and he has made probably 4 or 5 times now since the game happened, if the penalty is called against Marvin Harrison Jr., they get the ball at the 2 or the 1, and they punch that sucker in. Now, my biggest thing is Ohio State exposed Georgia as a whole across the board. There is a little difference between the 3-3-5 that Ohio State runs as a traditional 3-3-5 and the 3-3-5 that TCU runs as a 3-3-5 slot. So you're not going to see, I believe, the 3-3-5 slot is built where you're not going to see Georgia line put 3 out wide, either left or right, and just have the freaking stupid mailman stand back there and just toss it across the field short on a freaking whatever they call that freaking dump it outside and then the cut inside up field where they scored that touchdown from 21 yards out. You're not going to see things like that because TCU is built. TCU is built to prevent those kind of plays, and that honestly, don't be surprised if you see a Utah versus USC Pac-12 championship game performance out of TCU, where they're reading the tape that they saw and they see that kind of formation lineup and they just jump the crap out of that route. Kind of similar to how 2019 national championship Clemson Alabama when Tua threw that freaking short pass and Clemson dude just stepped in front of it. As far as this game, the TCU offense,
I will say,
dug in, and it's a tough offense. It literally punched Michigan in the mouth, and Michigan tried with stupid trick plays to come back, and TCU on both sides of the ball kept punching and punching and punching and didn't stop. Well, I shouldn't say didn't stop. They stopped to it. That's where TCU has to fix their problem. TCU let off the gap just a little bit against Michigan, where Michigan closed the gap. Because if you think about it, at one point the gap was like 12. They only won by 6. So there was enough by TCU to close that gap. Well, Georgia, the way Georgia is supposed to be built, if you let your foot off the gas and you have like a 14, 21 point lead, Georgia is built to close that gap and reverse it on you just like that, where you go from up 21 to down 14.
yeah. And one of the biggest keys, I think, is if you're TCU, you cannot kick field goals. If you get in the red zone, this is going to be one of those games where if you kick field goals, Georgia's more likely going to make you pay. Because it's not like I can understand, if you were playing, one of the Big 12 teams, sure, you kick a field goal, it's not going to hurt you. But you're playing Georgia. Georgia, you kick a field goal, it's going to cost you at the end.
Yeah, you're 69th. You are 69th in the red zone offense. You got to get those numbers up.
Well, Georgia's offense in the red zone, I believe, is pretty bad, too. That was one thing in my favor for our defense.
Well, yeah, it's because most of the year Georgia scored outside the red zone as well. I mean,
True.
A lot of the scores have been from 50 yards down the field. But I will say, I mean, again, all credit to TCU the way they played against Michigan, but they would not be in this game if it wasn't for those pick sixes. JJ McCarthy just threw 2 bad throws. Again, all credit to TCU for picking them off, especially the one was easy as pie. It was just right to the guy, and he ran it back. I mean, literally, if that does not occur, TCU's not here, and Michigan is. So, really, to your point, Buck, I'm like, again, TCU's going to have to get stops on Georgia, turnovers, pick sixes potentially to win again. If they
and score in the red zone.
And score in the red zone, but their defense is going to have to get stops. If Stetson Bennett does not turn the ball over, then it's going to be really hard for TCU to win.
I mean, here's an interesting stat, Buck. I might let you go. Georgia and Ohio State in that game had 1 turnover, and that 1 turnover came from Georgia, and y'all still lost. So that still says a lot about Georgia, that they can turn the ball over and still win.
No, this is the only last thing I'm going to say on this game. We're going to move on from each bowl. The only reason that we did not score with the turnover is because Ryan Day is a baby at play calling. He doesn't know outside of Clemson. That's all you do. You have to run the same kind of crap that you ran against Clemson in the COVID year sugar. Everybody said you didn't deserve to be. um, I thought he fixed that problem. He said, "Oh, I'll just get up and do that for Clemson, but we're not going to do it for everybody." No, you showed an aggressive. You needed to stay aggressive, and you stayed aggressive. I mean, I guess you did, but you only stayed aggressive. Crappy, we're off and you suck. But I mean, overall, this game.
I think another big key for TCU in this game is that it's not only the fact that their defense has to get stops, but they have to protect Max Duggan. I mean, CJ Stroud had time to throw, something that a lot of people thought that he would not have. A lot of people thought Georgia, their defensive line was going to rush him, and he was not going to be able to throw those deep balls that he did and those passes to Marvin Harrison. But he had enough time. Yet toward the end of the game, it started to break down a little bit, but that was more because he couldn't get those quick balls out to Marvin Harrison anymore, and he didn't really have a receiver that could get away, so he had to sit in there a little bit longer. Plus, an offensive line wears down as the game goes along anyway, but Max Duggan's going to have time to throw. If he's not able to get the ball out, if he's getting sacked multiple times in this game, that's a bad omen, and they're not going to be able to win either. They're going to have to give him time to throw, and they're also going to have to run the ball. I mean, I don't know how much they're going to have to run the ball in this game, because if Max Duggan throws for 400 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns and he has plenty of time to throw, they can win. But their running back's going to have to get some yards too. They're not going to be able to just abandon the run and that's it. They're going to have to get some yards on the ground because of the fact to at least keep the defense honest. They can, do more play action pass and put Max Duggan in space, maybe do some read option. But they're not going to be able to do that if they're not able to run the football at all.
Well, to take advantage of the passing game on Georgia's defense, Georgia is 65th in passing yards allowed per game. That will most definitely help TCU on Monday night because, Max Duggan's got a pretty good passing game, and, they're 13th in total offense. So if you want to beat Georgia, beat that passing game on defense. And Georgia is tied 71st in sacks per game. So TCU, Max Duggan, all you got to do is take advantage of that little weakness that Georgia has, and you're good to go. And score in the red zone.
That was my entire point. Like, if he has plenty of time to throw, just like CJ Stroud did, then Max Duggan's going to have a field day. But if he doesn't have time, if the pass rush gets to him, then it's going to be a long day. Because, again, to your point, the secondary is weak, but you have to have time to throw it to those guys, especially down the field. Because you look at, like, Marvin Harrison had the breakaway speed, that to get away from the corners. And Ohio State's other receivers didn't really have that. TCU is one guy. I mean, if Georgia can shut down Quentin Johnson, it's going to be a lot harder for them to win. I mean, they have other guys, but they're just going to have to find a way to protect Max Duggan, allow him to Edwards' point, run the ball as well. Again, his running game is going to be very important. But if he has time to throw and they're able to expose Georgia's secondary, they'll be fine. But they can't take sacks. They just cannot take sacks.
Yeah. One of my biggest keys for this is Georgia going to throw in some exotic blitzes, like show like a pre-line blitz and then be like, okay, we're not actually blitzing. Make Max Duggan think at the line. Be like, okay, if this is a wheel route, this is supposed to go to the wheel, and they're showing blitz. And he's like, okay, let me check and let's take this wheel out and let's do it this way or do it that way. And then it's actually coverage, and it's one of those things like, does Georgia throw in those exotic blitzes to see if they bite or not? Because, like you said, Jeffrey, it can help disguise that weak secondary. Because if Max Duggan doesn't have time to throw, like you said, and I'm like everyone else has said, guess what? Georgia's secondary ain't gonna have much to worry about because he'll be throwing all those short passes, and none of those long bombs will be anything to worry about.
I completely agree with you, Austin. That's a good, great breakdown, great points, man.
All you got to do is hey for TCU. All you got to do is look at the hospital.
I want TCU to win so I can watch Uncle Lou lose his mind, go crazy on there.
Yeah.
Now, my question for you guys: you think TCU will blitz a little bit more? Test the. You think they'll get a little risky with it, knowing how Georgia can score quick? Do you think they'll blitz a little bit? Maybe go after Bennett more instead of playing maybe a softer coverage or going man to man, my guys versus yours. How do you think
I
TCU should approach it?
if it was me, I would blitz one side and alternate. So, for example, if you have your like lineman and then you got your three linebackers, blitz off of the left with the left outside back first, and have your middle drop back and your right backer drop back, so that you're blitzing, but you got the coverage in the middle taken care of, and then same thing, but from the opposite side, blitz from the right side and drop your middle and left. And then, if you want, well, I wouldn't do this because that's one thing Ohio State was criticized with. Is you had Tommy Eichenberg, a linebacker, during a wide receiver. Because I was almost going to say, you want to run like a corner blitz or a safety blitz, have the safety blitz or the corner blitz, have whichever side have the linebacker drop back as part of the coverage. And TCU's off, I'll say, don't be stupid. If you want to run Horn Frog special, don't have the linebacker be the one throwing the ball to the quarterback. I'm talking to you, Michigan. Now.
Oh, I'd be happy as a pig if TCU won. It would be the best gift I got all year, and I just want a brisket tonight on a cooking channel. That's funny. I mean, to your point, I think that TCU's defense is going to have to find ways to rattle Bennett because, again, I mean, they rattle McCarthy a little bit, but I would say McCarthy just made bad throws. He just made mistakes in the big moment that he wasn't maybe ready for, or, just those throws he probably won't make in the future if he develops and he becomes a better quarterback in the future. He's probably not going to make those throws. And Stetson Bennett, as you call him, the mailman, because he's 25. I mean, he's an older guy. He has a lot of experience. It's just you have to make Stetson Bennett make mistakes. If you're TCU, you have to make him make mistakes. You have to have him throw a pick. Even better, a pick 6 or 2. He's got to make mistakes because if Georgia plays a clean game, it's going to be very hard for TCU to, score enough points. Because if Georgia's not turning the ball over, they're putting up points. And Georgia's defense is going to be able to slow down TCU somewhat, as long as TCU's not just throwing the ball over the field like Ohio State did. If TCU's doing that, then it could turn into a high-scoring game.
I would like to add to your comment, Jeffrey.
Go ahead.
Real quick, do you think now would it be wise, like, if you just get to Bennett, like if you don't sack him per se, but hit him, like Ohio State did with Stroud, and it didn't rattle Stroud's confidence per se. He got back up, and one of Buckeye Mike's biggest things was if you take a hit, get back up and run. But that's beside the point. Do you think if they do that with Bennett, he'll kind of be like C.J. Stroud before the Georgia game and be like, I don't want any more of that. I'm just going to throw it as quick as I can and hope my receivers make enough plays for me.
I think it depends on how hard and how often he's hit. I mean, if he gets hit once, he's going to be fine as long as he doesn't get hurt. But, I mean, if you're taking repeatedly your hits repeatedly, you're just getting hit over and over and over, then it gets to your head because at that point you've lost confidence in your offensive line. You're not feeling great, and you want to just get the ball out as quick as possible to avoid the punishment, to not keep getting what you're getting. It depends on how often TCU is even able to get to him. I mean, if they only get to him once or twice, he's going to be fine. But if it's a repeated onslaught, then he'll think about it. Any quarterback would. I mean, any quarterback's going to lose their confidence when they get banged up. I mean, look at Caleb Williams in the Utah game. He got hurt, but you lose your confidence altogether and your ability is weakened. That's the biggest detriment to running quarterbacks in the first place is when once they get banged up, and especially if they're not a really good passing quarterback in the first place, it just takes away all their skill. I don't think that's really going to hurt Bennett too much because even though Bennett does run the ball, that's not as much of his game. So even if he takes a couple hits, he's still going to be able to throw the ball down the field as long as he doesn't have anything wrong with his shoulder or legs, obviously, where he can't throw. But it's going to take more to rattle him. I know he's a smaller quarterback, but TCU would have to hit him repeatedly for that to happen. But I would think that TCU is going to do more quarterback run than Georgia unless they have to. I mean, Georgia doesn't really have to do quarterback run. Stetson Bennett didn't do it as much as Max Duggan had to do this year.
To your point, Georgia could play a clean game, and if they have enough 3-and-outs instead of turnovers, that would help TCU too. Mm-hmm. So it's just a matter of what kind of a clean game does Georgia play. If Georgia, I think if Georgia plays an absolute clean game, we either do have the 3-and-outs, but we're eating up a crap clock, and we're not scoring on every drive, then yeah, we're still going to win the game. But if TCU's getting there, and 3-and-outs, and it's like a 2-minute drive, TCU is a shot. Now, if TCU gets up, like they did it on Michigan, do you guys think that it's over, or am I right? Where, you got that lead, don't put off the gas because that's over.
I never, when a team takes a lead, ever think a game's over until it's over when you have a talented team. I mean, if TCU's up 21 with a minute to go in the game, it's over. But if it's even if they have a 21-point lead and the fourth quarter's just starting, the game is not over until it's over. That's just the way it is. When you're dealing with a Georgia or an Alabama, it's not over until the game's over. They're just too talented.
Yeah.
And like you said, a flip can switch and they just come back. So TCU,
I will say,
if they take the lead, to your point, stay aggressive and don't get conservative with the ball, because if you do, then you're gonna lose. Because I've seen many games where a team's winning big and then you fall apart because of the fact you just stop doing what got you the lead, and you're trying to play to hold on to win, and you can't do that. You have to play to win, not play not to lose. You have to play to win. So if you're TCU and you're up, keep playing the way you were, and you'll be fine.
I don't know. I feel like if you get to the fourth quarter and you're talking like 48 to somehow you're talking like a 48 to 24, 21 kind of game. To your point, I wouldn't let my foot off the gas or be conservative to where, like you said, play not to lose, play to win. But I mean, of course, I'm still going to watch. But I would almost at that point say, okay, this fourth quarter is going to be interesting because I feel like this thing is over. If it's like 48-21 or 48-24.
I mean, again, if TCU's up 4 scores, it's a little bit different than 2 or 3. Go ahead, Austin.
I will say, this relates to it. So when the Chiefs played the Buccaneers 2 years ago in the Super Bowl, everyone was saying Kansas City, they're the overwhelming favorites. Tampa can't hang, all that good stuff. Well, when Tampa got that big lead on them, they were aggressive. They stayed on it. They went after Mahomes. And I think in this game, if we see a similar situation like that, and it's like 24-7 TCU at halftime, I think they're going to go after Bennett. They're going to force him to say, okay, if Georgia's saying, okay, we know our run game's good, we'll run the ball and maybe TCU will make a mistake and give us a gap. TCU needs – I think they need to be more aggressive and make Bennett beat them. Like, make Stetson be the guy. Like, okay, Stetson, if you beat us, you deserve to win this. But we're going to blitz you. We're gonna put the pressure on you. We're not going to let you just hand the ball off. do your screens, do your slants. We're not going to let you do all that. We're going to make you get out of the pocket, and we're going to make you do the plays.
Yeah, that's what it was. 1-yard screen. Good Lord.
Yeah, if you're TCU, you can't let Georgia win by running the ball. I completely agree. And if you notice, more teams are designing their defensive scheme like that. I mean, Georgia didn't let Ohio State run that much, and Ohio State didn't really allow Georgia to run that much. Neither team. It was all through the air mostly. I mean, you had a couple runs, but the run game is basically in these big games have almost been shut down. I'm not saying every single time, and in a lot of these games, there's not a lot of running. It's just if it's going to be a run game, it's quarterback keep, literally, and that's most of the run because it just seems like the way offenses are being run now is that the short pass game is the run. And I know that's kind of cliche, but it is what it is. I mean, if you want to get 5 yards and you're playing a team like Georgia and they've got a great defensive line, instead of just running up the middle, if you're TCU, just throw a quick slant, get a couple blocks, you get 5 yards. Or put Max Duggan in the read option, have him keep, you get 5 yards. That's how you're getting 5 yards now instead of just run up the middle and literally pounding your way through. It's just these defensive linemen are so talented these days. It's so hard to do. Edwards don't watch an extra point. Yeah, it happens, man. That's football. Literally, it can happen anytime.
Or here's a better idea. Don't go for field goals unless it's fourth down and you trust your offense enough and you just want the points. Don't go for field goals if you're inside the red zone. Go for touchdowns. No field goal.
So my question,
freaking points on the board.
Buckeye Mike, I know that's going to give you nightmares for nights, but it'll be all right. You'll get them next year, buddy. Dude. So my question is for you. My question is for you guys. If you're Sonny Dykes and TCU, how aggressive do you be, so to speak? And what I mean by that is if it's 4th and 3 at midfield, and you're on, do you go for it? Or if it's 4th and 6 at the 25, like you're referring to, Buckeye Mike, do you go for it? Do you be that aggressive or no? Or would you say, okay, let me punt?
It depends on the scenarios in the game, though. For real quick, for instance, if TCU, if you have a 4th and 3 at midfield and you're up by 10, you probably punt. Especially if Georgia is. I understand it depends on the situation. It's just I'm getting to my point here. If Georgia is struggling on offense, if they're just struggling and they're not having a good game, and TCU's defense is stopping them, that's when you punt and you pin them. But if Georgia, if you're up 10, but Georgia's scoring every single time, that's when you could potentially go for it if you don't trust your defense to get stops. It really basically comes down to how Georgia is playing on offense. If you're winning or losing the game, if TCU's losing, they're going to have to go for it, obviously. But if you're winning, if you're getting stops, if it's a 24-13 game in the fourth somehow, and TCU's been getting stops all game long, punt the ball, pin them. But if it's a shootout game and Georgia's been scoring every single time, that's when you could consider going for it.
Look, if TCU is in the red zone on offense, it's 4th down, go for the touchdown. Go for the touchdown. Take that chance. It's the national championship. Take your chances. You got one shot at this, Horned Frogs. Take your chances. Especially if it's a 4th and 1.
So, where I stand on this, the way SEC wins offense, except if you're Alabama or Georgia, you're going to want to go for it every time, unless it mathematically makes sense. So if it's the first drive of the game, you got them a 3-and-out, and you got the ball, your own 30, stupid like Manning, go for it there, punt it. But you're going to want to go for it. Now, if you go for it out of like Ohio State, don't be like Ohio State, 12 men on the field. Have the allotted men on the field. Take the punt. I would probably, honestly, if you take the punt, go the opposite direction because then they're probably figuring they'll go the same way as Ohio State. The defense is key to this game, especially because every course because you cannot let up. You have to keep beating down and beating. Eventually, when you're just out of instance, you reach over to the counter and pull out the vase, and you gotta freaking crack it over their heads. You cannot let up defense. If the defense lets up and it gets close, it's over. Because Ohio State, Georgia is gonna down. He's gonna turn around, turn up, and choke you like the Undertaker, and then put the light.
Yeah. And my big question for you guys is how important are special teams going to be in this game? We've been talking about the offenses and defenses, but a lot of times special teams can decide a lot of these big games
Oh,
too. Look at SC in the Cotton Bowl. I know that's a little off topic, but that was a big reason why they lost that game. I know Buckeye Mike, that makes him happy because USC lost, but what do y'all think? You think special teams is going to play a big factor in this game?
yeah.
Special teams plays a factor in big games when it's close and it's a one-score game either way, and that one mistake is the reason you lost. That's when it matters. I mean, it literally matters if that play is what cost you the game. Like if you're USC and you had that play on the one, if that don't happen, you more than likely win. That's why it matters. You want to make sure that special teams is not the reason you lost. So just don't make mistakes. And it'd be great if you could get a kick or punt return for a touchdown if you're either team. But just don't make mistakes.
The only way that special teams doesn't matter in this game per se is if it's like the fourth quarter. It's like a 6-point game either way. It could be his favorite. It could be the 6-point game in the fourth quarter, and you're sending your punt unit out for the first time. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I was saying about the 4th and 3. It depends on the game, the way it's being played. If Georgia is scoring every single time, then if you're TCU, you got to go for it on a 4th down. On at the 50 if it's short or on your side of the field. But if you're getting stops, that's when I would say punt, because you're getting stops. If you trust your defense, if you've stopped Georgia 4, 5, 6, 7 times in this game, that's when you punt. Because if you did it all those times, you could do it again. You don't want to go for it and say, well, if you had a punted, then they would have had him pinned at the 2. Georgia was rattled. They weren't playing well, all that. Instead, if you don't get it, then Georgia gets the ball and has the confidence, goes down the field. That's why I'm saying that's where, to me, you don't go for it in every single scenario if you're TCU. I mean, obviously that's why I said special team. That's why I said special teams matters if it's a close game, it's a one-score game, and that play caused the loss. It obviously, if it's a blowout, it doesn't matter for sure.
Well, I mean, their special teams does matter because it's like to Edwards' point where he says special teams won't matter, but TCU is 18th in punt returns, and Georgia is 15th in punt returns. So I think a little bit of everything matters.
Now, let me ask you guys. I know this is like a situational thing. Do you think if you're TCU and you're saying, do you pull a Sean Payton special from the 06 Super Bowl against the Manning Colts? Do you do that with Georgia? Be like, hey, we need to steal possession here because it's 17-10. We're up. Do we do that?
Come up with your own trick play. Come up with your own trick play. That's what you got to do.
Stop running these modified Philly specials. It's cool if it's executed properly, but again, when you're a freaking idiot and you're not having the wide receiver come off to the edge to throw the ball to the quarterback in or you have a linebacker coming off the edge to throw it. That's retarded. Go back to elementary school because you don't know how to coach.
Always comes back to the Philly special.
Because that's all anybody does anymore.
If you run a trick play, man, the key is that the guy that if he throws the ball, if it's on one of those plays and he's not the quarterback, he has to know how to throw the ball. It's kind of like if you saw Illinois against Mississippi State at the end, it didn't work. But that guy, the receiver for Illinois, did that one trick play in that game. Isaiah Williams, he used to be their quarterback, so he can throw the ball. So that you can run plays like that if the player knows how to throw the ball. If he doesn't, then you can't just pick a player and say, "Hey, linebacker, hey, running back, we want to run this play."
Mhm.
You can throw if you have to. If he doesn't know how to throw the ball, it's not going to work. Again, you Buck and Mike already basically pointed out, but again, just to reiterate, you have to have the guy know how to throw the ball for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Ohio State ran the Philly special first, before Philly even ran it. Who threw the ball? Evans threw the ball, or not Evans. Evan Spencer threw the ball to Michael Thomas, the very edge of the end zone.
What about the Antoine Randall play for the Steelers? He was a former quarterback. Again,
There you
same
go.
thing.
Yeah.
If you have like former quarterbacks that are converted to another position, as the absolute perfect player to have to do a play like that because they still know how to throw the ball somewhat accurately. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and honestly, I know this is a tough point, but to your point about that point, honestly, I would give better props to Randall L because the way that he had to, he like threw it, he kind of threw it sideways almost because he took off on his back foot, jumped up in the air, and like. Whereas if you watch the Mike Evans, God, if you watch the Evan Spencer throw to Michael Thomas, he literally comes around the edge, and then he has enough time to settle himself like a quarterback would and pivot and throw.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Whatever happened to the old-fashioned flea flicker plays where you flick it to the running back and then he flicks it back to you, or with the screen flea flicker? Whatever happened to those? Why does it always have to be these fancy dancies? Let's pitch it that way, try to run a Philly special 2.0. JJ McCarthy, you go that way, and we'll have this guy block that way. Whatever happened just to the normal flea flickers and stuff?
Edwards said just put the backup quarterback at a different number to confuse them.
Or just do like a fake field goal or like a fake punt,
Well, to your point, Austin, Michigan did successfully run a flea flicker in the third quarter of the festival because at that time TCU's defense was like, we'll give it up. But and then to your point, Jack, the only successful field goal I've ever seen. Well, no, there was two. There was the Michigan State one against Notre Dame. Thank God Will's not here. When the holder moved to the sideline, threw it down the field to the tight end, he ran it all the way in. The other one that I remember off the top of my head that was successful was one with LSU, where the holder got the snap, put it down. The kicker picks off around the holder, so to the outside of the holder, and the holder is then sitting there, and he just goes whoop, over his shoulder. The kicker's right there.
They did that in 2007 against South Carolina and in 2010 against Florida.
Yeah, that's the only time something like that I've ever seen executed.
It can happen again. So
this
you
is
want
an
to beat
interesting
Georgia?
question.
Outsmart them. You may not beat them, but you can outsmart them.
That's the key.
So let me ask you guys. So this is my question for you guys. We get close to picking. So if you got 2 minutes left, who do you want to have the ball last, Duggan or Bennett? Who are y'all taking in a 2-minute drill?
Duggan.
With all the marbles on the table.
Duggan.
If you have Max Duggan 100% healthy, not banged up, for sure him because of his running ability. And if TCU does the read option, something USC did not do in the Tulane game at the end, and whether, he was told not to or not, or he was worried about it, all that, a healthy Max Duggan that can run the football, him, because he can do so much with the ball in his hands. If Max Duggan's not healthy, then I would take Stetson Bennett. But assuming Max Duggan is able to be at his 100% at the end of a game, against Georgia, and he's not taking hits, and he still can run the football the way he could at the beginning of a game, I'd take him.
I mean, the only thing, Stetson Bennett is because he's 25 and should be playing in the NFL or literally delivering people the mail, but he's not good enough to be in the NFL. The only reason I would take him is because of his age, and so he knows he's been in the offense long enough. He knows how to run that style of offense.
Me personally, there's a case to be made for both because you look at Stetson Bennett, look what he did against Ohio State. That was a great drive. Even Buckeye Mike applauded it because it was a really good drive. But it's like
that one throw between three defenders was really good. The back of the end zone one, it was a good throw, but that was a better catch.
Yeah,
that was a fantastic catch. Kind of like almost to not go off top, but the Mac Jones throw to Devontae Smith in the back of the end zone, he caught it with one hand. It wasn't as impressive. For a tight end, that was impressive.
And the thing is, though, Duggan's done this multiple times this year, though. He did it against Baylor, Kansas State. I know he was on the losing end of that, but that was because of the play call. That wasn't really his fault. And that's, and then against Kansas, I believe he did it. As Stetson, he did it against Ohio State in the biggest game, and you could say, yeah, Max Duggan did it in meaningless regular season games. Bennett did it in the biggest game of the year, arguably.
Well, the only reason why I said healthy Max Duggan is because I think that, Stetson Bennett, Max Duggan is a really good thrower, but like Stetson Bennett has proven that he can get the ball in tight windows. That's why I'm saying that, you would take him in an event that you're going to throw the ball. Yeah, the practice squad player. Yeah, that's funny. But with Max Duggan, you have to have him running the ball. On drives at the end of games, you have to take his running ability into account, and that's what makes him so dangerous. That's why you need him to be able to use that ability. Whereas Stetson Bennett, to lead you down the field, he's more likely just going to throw the ball every time. Whereas with Max Duggan, you need that running ability.
I will say.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Buckeye Mike, before I give my answer.
I just had a question. So, how many times has TCU been underdogs?
TCU's been underdogs a few times because of the fact that they weren't projected to be a top 5 team. I mean, they don't have a top 5 roster, and they found ways to win. That's why they're here. And again, kudos to them for it.
And how many times is Georgia underdogs?
Again, to your point, you're going to say Max Duggan because of the fact he's led a team that shouldn't be where they're at to where they're at. They're here largely due to him, but also their defense have found stops. To your point about Stetson Bennett, he's on a fantastic team with fantastic players everywhere, so that you're basically saying it reduces the praise he deserves because he's got great players around him. That is a good argument, but still he has done what he's done as a former walk-on. I think that's what gets the credit that he deserves because, to your point, TCU shouldn't be here basically because they've been underdogs, but Max Duggan led them to wins. Well, Stetson Bennett shouldn't be either because of the fact that he was a former walk-on. So both have arguments either way.
Well, no, I'm not
heart surgery as well 2 years ago. So that is another reason for a notch in his direction. So both have arguments.
I'm not saying Duggan and TCU don't deserve to be there. They definitely deserve to be there. I mean, the only way you have a 12 in the conference runner-up or champion not in the playoff is because they're a group of 5 team. I mean, my point was TCU has been more of an underdog than Georgia. So Max Duggan knows how to go about this and win this game. Whereas Georgia's always been a favorite. And it again comes down to which Georgia's is it Kentucky or Missouri Georgia? Or is it everybody else Georgia?
I will say they played bad against Missouri. The Kentucky game, they just barely played and just got the win. That was more what happened there. But I mean, basically what you're trying to get at is, I don't know if this is your exact point, but you don't think if Stetson Bennett played for TCU, he could have led them to where they're at, is your point. That's kind of what it is. Again, Stetson Bennett, he's on at this point right now because Alabama's had it for a long time, but Georgia's the best team in college football right now. They have the most talent. They're playing the best. And Stetson Bennett, like Bryce Young, you could argue had to do more this year for Alabama because the team wasn't as good overall.
Mm-hmm.
He had to do more. He had to do more Houdini plays. You know what I'm saying? Running around, find ways to win. Whereas Stetson Bennett, it's like Georgia just operates. They're just fundamentally, like right now, the best team in college football. Stetson Bennett just has to not be the problem. As long as Stetson Bennett's not the problem, then Georgia's fine. Whereas Max Duggins had to win games for TCU. Stetson Bennett's been more of he just has to play good. If he doesn't mess up, they win. Ohio State's the first game that he really had to actually win the game at the end.
Yeah,
I guess.
I will say, though, Jeffrey, Stetson Bennett in the biggest moment, though, three strikes right down the field and that big touchdown at the end of the end zone in the biggest game of his career. Other than because last year in the Natty, you could say, the defense won the game. That's fine. But this was like the biggest game. Can you prove it to us, Stetson? Because a lot of people doubted, said you're being carried by that defense.
Whoa,
and which
whoa,
a lot
whoa.
of people
say that, but I did say that though. If you heard me, I did say.
No.
Hey, Buckeye, can I say
I didn't
quick?
say that, Buckeye. I might just clarify.
Austin just said about Stetson Bennett, how he let him down in Ohio State. I just said that. I said that he did it in the Ohio State game. I said that. That was the only game this year where he's had to lead him down the field, whereas Max Duggins had to do it in like 8 games. That was the point I said. I agree with y'all. But Stetson Bennett, he's done what he needed to do all season long, and then he showed up to play in the biggest game against Ohio State, and he let him down the field and won. But Max Duggins had to pull a rabbit out of his hat for TCU all season long.
The difference.
I want to preface.
The difference is, I know the chat's going to give me crap for this, but the difference is the way that Ohio State defense was playing at the end of the game. You could have driven them down for a touchdown. I could have driven them down for a touchdown. Jackson could have. That defense was playing like trash at the end of the game. Why? They were trying to be conservative. No, you tack like tack dogs and go after Bennett and literally rip his head off.
But to Austin's point, at the end of the day, they did. He did lead him down the field. That's all that matters. Doesn't matter what Ohio State did. Bennett could have thrown a pick 6 like J.J. McCarthy, and then we'd really be talking about how he doesn't deserve to be in the NFL. He's not good, and he doesn't deserve to be in the big moments. He didn't mess up. That's my point. Stetson Bennett, as long as he doesn't mess up, then he's fine. Georgia wins games because he hasn't made mistakes this year, and he led them down the field against Ohio State. If Max Duggan made mistakes, TCU's a 6-6 They're here because he played way over expectations, and they had timely defensive stops several times this year instead of one game.
Can I make a
when your defense is trash to the point that your linebacker is covering a wide receiver because your depth is so garbage on the final drive of the game, of course you're going to lead them down there and score a touchdown. There's nothing fancy special, oh my God, about what Bennett did. If you ask me, the game against Alabama last year more proved it than this game because you won almost at Alabama. You won Georgia their first national championship since whenever.
I want to say this though. I understand and hear the TCU side of it. Bennett, doesn't have very much talent, and he's had to win a lot of the games. And people praise him for that. They should. He came second in Heisman voting. Great. Like, he deserves all the praise. But I know, Buckeye, Mike, you say because your defense played conservative and stuff, and Stetson plays for the best team in a lot of people's eyes. Does that still not make it impressive that he did go down that way? Because we've seen a lot of great quarterbacks not go down the field with great teams. Look at how many Alabama quarterbacks couldn't do it. Because there's been a couple in their histories. Deshaun Watson, he had a great team. He was able to take them down there. And some people call it the greatest game in college football history because of the Clemson-Bama ending. But everyone praises Deshaun. He's the savior. And Stetson, he should get the same amount of praise. It doesn't matter if he plays for Georgia or if he played for Jeffrey's Indiana Hoosiers. He
To
still
your
let him
point,
down
Austin,
on the.
I basically tightrope y'all's two arguments of Buckeye Mike's and yours, Austin. So really, the argument's kind of already ended. I basically said, to your point, Austin, Stetson Bennett deserves praise because he let him down the field against Ohio State, but he does play for the best team in the country right now. And that's where the knock is. But he was a former walk-on. He deserves a lot of credit because he's overexceeded expectations, and he didn't choke it against Ohio State, and he let him down the field. Whereas Max Duggins had to be the guy for TCU over and over and over and over and over, because if he wasn't the guy, then they'd be 6-6. So both of y'all's arguments are correct.
Troy V says have to hand it to UGA. They found a way to score on the Buckeyes, and the defensive back slipping, leaving the wide receiver wide open. Took real skill to connect with him. Hope the sarcasm comes through. Hey, now, I will say that, but that touchdown that he eventually did hit Aiden Ross, I think how you say it, or Adonis Mitchell, I think, however you say it, that guy, the corner, Buckeye Mike, you would know his name better than I would. He was draped all over him. Like, Stetson had to put that in a tight window.
Okay.
But he still deserves a little credit for that. Because that's a gutsy throw.
You guys are still talking about Stetson Bennett versus Duggan, and I basically just said it for the third time that both of y'all's arguments are right. Stetson Bennett, again, he's not. It's not as impressive potentially. It's not as impressive potentially because he played for the best team, but he let him down the field. Deserves the credit. He was a former walk-on, but Max Duggins had to do it over and over and over and over and over. Both of y'all are right.
My defense is of this specific comment because I'll tell you right now. First of all, J.J. McCarthy did that. So is that really saying much comparing Stetson to be in the same category as J.J. McCarthy? Or as he's now known to me as J.J. McWhiney? It's not really. But to your point, Troy, I know it's going to happen, right? But here's the thing, Austin. If that slip doesn't happen, that Georgia wide receiver is open by 30 yards. He's so wide open because of the slip. And let's just say Georgia doesn't score a touchdown, then that stupid throw that you keep referencing is moot point. It doesn't matter at that point. This game's over.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
We ready to make that national title pit yet? Or not just yet?
Hold on, one last thing.
Again, one more time,
guys. We'll put the argument to bed.
Arguments are right over Bennett and Duggan. They're both right. They both have validity to them.
I would like to say this before we go to our picks. Right. So, Buckeye Mike, I acknowledge your statement on that. I agree. It would be moot point if that didn't happen. But at the end of the day, it did, and he made the great throw.
But Duggan's done it
going to say
more times this year. That's the argument for Duggan. He's done it multiple times this year.
Again, I know it happened now. I acknowledged that when I gave that answer to Troy. Yes, I know it's a moot point, but the cornerback, again, if the cornerback doesn't slip, probably don't score a touchdown on that drive. And then Ohio State comes back and scores a touchdown, making the immaculate moot point. But again, it did happen. Sucks that it happened, but it happened.
I think Troy makes more about Ohio State, Georgia than TCU, Georgia, to be frank. I think there's a really good chance we've exceeded that mark.
Oh, yeah.
We're doing really good on the Ohio State, Georgia recap, though. To Troy's point, back to TCU again, Max Duggan and Bennett, both of them have arguments for who's better, who's more clutch, and all that. Again, both of y'all's points are right. But Troy's point is kind of also right as well. I think TCU needs Georgia to have a bad game to win. That is a accurate statement unless TCU plays a perfect game. Then TCU could win even if Georgia played better. But TCU would have to play a perfect game.
Troy V says, Bennett is a winner. My mind was changed on him last year. Was just bringing up my I can't say that word. Aggressive. Yeah, aggravation with my team. and their lack of D in that game. Thank you, Buckeye Mike and Jeffrey.
You're welcome.
I mean, he's got a point. Bennett is a winner, whether we like it or not.
I acknowledge that. But he won last year, so he can. He can win the game.
Again, Max Doug has done it so many times this year, and he deserves a lot of credit too. I mean,
I know.
he's won like 8 games on his own and a little bit of defense,
Oh,
whereas Bennett's had to do it.
We both
one
acknowledge
time.
they're great
So
quarterbacks.
again, both are fantastic in their own right, and I could see arguments for why both are more clutch. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who's more clutch if the game's not even close. The only way it's going to matter is if the scenario even happens in the final 2 minutes of the game and someone has the ball. If that don't happen, then this doesn't even matter.
Buckeye Mike, they said this is your therapy session. That's kind of funny.
It is funny, but
Yeah, but
anyway,
are we ready to make our pitch yet?
I am.
I guess
Okay. Who's starting?
Jeffrey, you're first.
Yeah, you gotta give away my.
Go
secret.
get him, Jeffrey.
Yeah. All right. This game, I mean, again, we've broken it down so many different ways, so many different angles, all sides of the ball, specifically talking about Ohio State, Georgia as a reference point. And again, TCU's defense is going to have to slow down Georgia's offense. They're just going to have to. If Georgia's having their way, just scoring every single time, then your scenarios of the 4th and 3 are going to have to come into play where TCU's going to have to go for it if Georgia's scoring every single time. And TCU's offense, I think that they will be able to have some deep shots in the game because we've referenced that Georgia's secondary is fairly weak. They've given up a lot of deep balls this year. But if Georgia gets to Duggan, then it's going to be tough. If their defensive line is able to rush them, then it's going to be hard for him to, do what he normally does, even with his running ability, getting out of the pocket. You talk about the clutchness. Again, both quarterbacks are clutch in their own ways. Bennett, he's clutch. He's proven he can win big games, but he also is one of the best teams in the country. Max Duggan's been able to lead an underdog team, and he's won a lot of games. So if the game comes down either way, I think both quarterbacks are capable of getting the win. But at the end of the day, the toughest thing is going to be for TCU is that Michigan is a really talented team, but Michigan doesn't have as much talent as Georgia does. They just don't. If you look at the recruiting rankings, I'm not saying that those are the end-all and be-all, but Michigan, most of the time, is like 8th to 10th in recruiting. Georgia's 1, 2, or 3, or 4 every single year. So it's going to be very tough for TCU with the amount of talent that Georgia has on the team to go the whole game, all 60 minutes. It's going to be really hard. I think they can do it. I think TCU has a really good shot to win. It'd be really cool if they did win. It'd be the ultimate underdog story, be the awesomest story ever. But I'm going to go with Georgia to beat TCU 35-31 because I think that Georgia's talent at the end of the day is going to be a little bit too much.
So Jeffrey says repeat. Jackson.
My go? Okay. Well, first off, little joke to start. Jeffrey, how dare you insult Michigan? They're going to be the national champions next year, according to them.
If they don't,
anyway,
if they treat every opponent like Ohio
not an insult. Michigan recruits well, but they don't have as many talented players as Georgia does.
Yeah, Georgia when you're when you're average around 10th to 13th best recruiting class every year, you'd not recruit very well.
Well, it's great,
but anyway,
not Georgia level.
Austin,
that was my joke for the day.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Michigan's to be national champs, they have to quit. They have to quit treating their opponents like TCU.
Man, I know this is bad, but I'm drinking that TCU Kool-Aid, that magic carpet ride. There's just something it's something special in the air. Like it only comes around once so often, and I feel like TCU is that underdog everyone wants to win, but Georgia's the big bad dogs. They ain't gonna let it happen on their watch. And the big question is is the clock going to strike midnight on TCU, just like it did on Ohio State on New Year's? Sorry, Buckeye Mike. But in this game, I think, like Jeffrey made points, that Stetson Bennett and Max Duggan are both great quarterbacks. Quarterbacks, both are clutch, both can do a lot. I think it's going to come down to whose defense makes the plays. If TCU gets turnovers and their defense plays like they did against Michigan and don't give up a lot of points, we could see this go their way. But if we see the Georgia defense that made Bryce Young look bad, it's going to be a long night for Duggan. But in this game, I'm getting on that carpet again. I'm going TCU 37, Georgia 28. I'm getting on that magic carpet ride one more time.
You got guts, Austin. I'll say that. Buckeye Mike, what's your national title pick?
Oh, you want to close it out? I was going to close it out.
I can do that.
Jackson wants to say the best for last, man.
Well, I don't have my chalice of supremacy yet. Shout out to Josh Pate over at Late Kick.
Best of the best.
If I had my chalice, that sucker would be filled with some purple liquid, baby.
Oh yeah,
Dude,
yeah, me too, man.
I ain't been wrong ever with TCU this year. I am undefeated picking TCU. That being said, I don't think this game is going to be a blowout like the Michigan game should have been. It was trending that way. In order for it to be, like I said, TCU cannot let up off the gas. But Max Duggan's a freaking monster. Stetson Bennett's a twig. He just has good lines that he doesn't get snapped in. The defense lacks both teams. Special teams, in my opinion, favors TCU better than it does Georgia, even though statistically, Jackson said Georgia. I feel like TCU has a little bit more breakout players because Max Duggan gets thrown into the breakout category because he is a mobile quarterback, where Stetson's more. He can be mobile if he has to. He's more of the statue type that everybody loves to classify CJ as. At the end of the day, give me them shooting fly out them, baby, at the Bulldog. At the TCU, 42, Georgia, 24.
Ooh, you're really confident TCU, aren't you, man?
So TCU is going to beat Georgia by 18, but TCU is beating almost every team by one score this year. Okay, that makes sense, man. It'd be really cool if TCU was able to win like that, man. But yeah,
here's the thing: you're right, but if you look at the Michigan tape, they could have won that game outright by a blowout.
Well, again, if Michigan doesn't throw the 2 pick sixes, then I mean they could have won as well. So I mean, again, hey, I mean, I almost picked TCU. It'd be really cool for it to happen. Like I said, I don't pick with my heart. I mean, I don't have anything against Georgia because I mean, Georgia's. I mean,
I don't even.
It's just it would be really cool to see TCU win. I just don't know if they can get it done. We'll see.
Again,
I mean,
I'm not really picking with my heart because nobody in this panel or in America or in the world anywhere would be surprised if Georgia wins this game. Georgia's favored by it. So Georgia's obviously favored to win the game. My thing is,
there's just something special there for TCU.
Yep.
That's what
pick.
And honestly, I want to go with TCU. Like I was gonna go with TCU until I looked at the stats on their defense. Man, it was just like, oh man.
Yeah, but their stats on the defense was just as bad, if not a little worse, when they played Michigan. and they beat Michigan.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I
And
said that J.J. McCarthy through the 2 pick sixes. If Stetson Bennett doesn't turn the ball over and plays a clean game, it's gonna be really tough for TCU to win unless they're getting stops, as Buck I might
I
point
will,
out.
I will
yeah,
say,
but I have to say, the way to beat Georgia is just beat up that passing game on defense. You're good to go, and take advantage of the red zone opportunities that you have. But I do think it's going to be a tight one. And I think we're going to see our first repeat national champions is 2011, 2012. Georgia 38, TCU 35.
At the end of the day,
I will
I just
say,
champion that's not from the SEC, not from the Big Ten, not from the ACC. And if the Pac-12 had someone actually capable of contending, winning, and not
USC with the
having to
defense.
go back and not having to go back in the 15 to 20 years, then they're Pac-12. But guess what? You don't have anybody capable enough, apparently.
mhm.
Does anybody know Will's pick?
He
I
never
will
said.
say,
Hi, Georgia.
TCU fans, if you're listening right now, I want y'all to enjoy this because you don't know if you'll ever get back to this point. Like, because this may be your one special moment. And who knows if you'll ever get back here. You know, because Buckeye Mike and Jackson, my two cohorts here, they're Ohio State, Alabama. They're almost guaranteed to be there every time. For you guys, TCU fans, enjoy this. And if you can win a national championship, just sit back and watch the national media go nuts.
And
Because
you
they're going to be
won a
like, darn,
playoff game
precious
before Texas
SEC.
and Oklahoma. So that is awesome in of itself. So you'll always get to hang your hat over Texas, Oklahoma, and saying, we won a playoff game before you guys did.
To Troy's point about TC, they do use the portal to supplement the recruiting, though. I mean, they are getting some really good players in the transfer portal, though. I mean, if the playoff expands to 12 teams and they're still getting really good players, and Sonny Dykes stays at TCU and he continues, having them play at a high level, they could be back. I don't know about being back in the championship game, but they might be back in the playoff.
I'm sure they'll be back
So,
because the Big 12's getting weaker.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Again, they could be the best in the conference if they, don't slip up and allow anybody else to take it.
So, last thing before we go, guys. Who do you think is going to win most valuable player in this game? So, Jeffrey, since you picked Georgia, and Jackson, you picked Georgia. I picked TCU. Buckeye Mike, you picked Georgia, right?
TCU.
TCU. So for each of us, who is our most valuable player in this game? Who do you think they'll award it to?
Well, I mean,
is my question.
It should go to a different player, like a defensive player, if some guy on defense play really good, but it's probably going to go to the quarterback. It usually does. Stetson Bennett, if he throws for 350 yards, 4 touchdowns, he'll win it. I mean, because we've seen games this year where, like, in these big games where a defensive guy had like 15 tackles and he won the most valuable player, and they still get it to the quarterback. So it'll probably be Stetson Bennett, unless someone just has a supreme.
If it's Georgia,
MVP will be Stetson Bennett.
It'll either be Stetson Bennett if it's Georgia, or it'll be one of the wide receivers. It could be Brock Bowers. Highly doubt it. But
Brock Bowers, yeah.
Or if somehow a defensive player does get it, it's going to be the stupid kid that was a complete idiot, could have been ejected from the Peach Bowl, that took that hit on Marvin Harrison, because I think that's the guy who is covering him.
So you're basically saying if he knocks out 4 players, then he'll win the award, right?
Well, no.
I'm kidding.
He's hyped for the best player.
It's probably going to be the quarterbacks, man. It usually is.
Yeah. But the difference is with TCU, I could see it Mac. I could see it being Johnson, the wide receiver. And I could see it being what's his name? That running back, Keandre.
Kendre Miller, if
Yeah.
he's able to play, but that other guy, I forget his name, Amari Demercado.
And if it's Demercado playing, it's not going to be a running back. It's going to be Justin Johnson, that
Yeah.
Ted Ginn Jr.
I hope the draft scouts are watching the national title because there's some good players for both sides.
Now, that's kind of a dumb statement. It's more than watch the national title. I mean, you could be right. Maybe they do, but I would assume because it's the national championship, you're looking at who you're going to take.
I just think that Jackson, he's just ragging on the draft analyst right now because he was like, Mel Kiper will watch Bryce Young instead of Will Levis, who isn't playing. Like, that's what he's referring to, kind of thing.
Well, also watch Matt Duggan, Mel Kiper, if you're watching. So you're going to be watching a very good quarterback in Duggan.
Question before we go. Where do we think, based on his performance this year, if this is his time to go, where do we think Max Duggan is going? Like what round?
Say it one more time.
What round do you think Max Duggan will be in the draft if he's gone after this year?
Oh, he's going to be gone after this year. But, if TCU wins it all, everybody got to put him in the first round. That's all I can say.
Here's
He's
my
way
thing.
better than Will Levis.
I don't see him jumping Bryce. Do you think he jumps CJ if he wins it all?
I doubt it.
There'd be enough?
No, but he jumps over Will Levis.
It's comparable.
I think that CJ Stroud, it was questionable if he would drop some for, everybody giving him flag for not potentially playing 100%, maybe a little bit, but not far. But the way he played against Georgia, he's just fine. His size and, I can't stand the size argument, but CJ Stroud has the ideal quarterback size. That's why he was already a high pick, but he showed that he actually is really good. Bryce Young, he has all the intangibles, and even though he's short, the running ability and the incredible throws he can make on the run. But I mean, to me, with Max Duggan, I don't even think it should matter if he wins it all or not. I think he should be drafted fairly high. I mean, the dude has shown that he is a lot better than people thought he was before this year. He has definitely overexceeded any expectations anybody had for him, and he's played fantastic. I don't think a quarterback should be drafted high just because you're the ideal quarterback size. I just think that I think if you have the ideal size, but you don't really perform at a high level, I think you should be drafted lower and then, see what you can do once you're in the NFL. But I don't think you should be drafted high just because you have the size. The best quarterbacks that are playing right now should be drafted higher instead of somebody that 5 to 6 years from now could be good.
I mean, to your point, though, about the size argument, Drew Brees is a good example. He was on the short end closer to Kyler Murray than CJ or whoever is the top quarterback in the league, And dude, you should have went to like 2 or 3 more, but that's besides the point. And I mean, overall, he had a lot of success for being on the small end. I was going to say quarter, but smaller end.
But yeah, this should be a really good game. Hopefully Georgia spares us if they do win. Hopefully it's like a 31-24 game. Hopefully they don't do a spanking like it's their child. We don't want any of that. But hopefully it's a good game. And guys, we're excited to announce that Thursday we're starting a college basketball season, jumping into that a little bit. So if any of you college basketball fans out there, come join us for Thursday.
Come on
because
over.
that football's leaving us. And Sunday we'll be doing trivia, hopefully. So come join us back for that. And Tuesday we'll be back here to recap the Natty. So come on back, and we'll talk about how Georgia blew it or TCU just flat out won it. Come join us. Come join us Sunday with trivia, though. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you all Sunday.
Stay safe.